But at the end of the day, I thought Donald Trump was going to focus on the American worker, vitalizing our manufacturing. Where is all that? We're only focused on the Middle East and wars in the Middle East. This is madness.
Right, so let me set the stage here for a second. We've got Rob Schmitt over at Newsmax, and he's basically playing the role of the predictable pro-war hawk, and he's squaring up against independent journalist Glenn Greenwald. And what unfolds is a pro-war narrative getting completely torn apart. Every talking point, every justification, every scare tactic demolished with nothing but the actual facts and the administration's own words and promises. Very calmly, I might add. It is a total short-circuiting of the hawkish narrative. Let's dive in.
You agree this is a very dangerous regime in Iran. Do you agree with that?
I agree that this war is way more dangerous to Americans than the Iranian regime ever was. We have had... You know how many attacks we've had in our... Can I just answer?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
You know how many attacks we've had?
Just going to say, you're going to get that a lot. A lot of him wanting to answer, being cut off by this dude, Rob. It's going to happen several times over. So, patience. You're going to have to deal with it.
Can I just answer?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
You know how many attacks we've had on our soil, on American soil, by Iranian terrorists or by Shia terrorists over the last, say, 30 years? Zero. There have been huge numbers of attacks that come from the countries we prop up, from the dictatorship of Saudi Arabia.
What about
and throughout the region? But Iran is a threat to Israel, not to the United States.
All right, a rather robust start from Glenn right out of the gate. You can see the dynamic immediately. Rob is coming in with that loaded, almost necessary prompt about acknowledging the sheer danger of the regime. He's trying to corner his guest, setting the terms of engagement right from the start. But Glenn is completely flipping the premise. He's not taking the bait at all. And it's vital to emphasize his main point here, because the actual track record of attacks on the United States, it simply doesn't align with all the urgent pro-war rhetoric we're constantly bombarded with on cable news. I mean, think about it like this. Not a single attack on American soil by these specific factions in 3 decades. Not one. Nothing. Yet, somehow, that is the exact narrative the warhawks are pushing now.
Iran continued to develop nuclear weapons, openly spoke about developing nuclear weapons and using them on Israel. Constant chance of death to America, death to Israel, and all the rest.
And it sounds convincing, and that's the trap. It implies an immediate existential threat to American citizens. But when you look at the raw history, it just isn't there. And so, if the core argument that the regime is an independent, deadly threat to the US, if it falls apart, well, then this entire push for military escalation suddenly looks completely unjustified. And Rob, he's not going to allow for that.
Iran is a threat. I mean, how many Americans live in Israel? 200,000 or so? I mean, how many Americans do we have on bases throughout the Middle East that have been attacked by Iran? How many, the effects of proxy terror throughout the region?
By that rationale, we have to defend every country. There are Americans in every country, living in every country throughout the world.
Exactly. What kind of metric is that? I mean, like, you could look up, let's go for it, right? We could look up Americans living in the United Kingdom, right? There we go. There's 200,000 Americans living here in the UK. So what? Is America obligated to come and fight our wars and to pursue our interests? Is that how it works? Or, you know, what about, here's one, Canada. The US is aggressing against Canada ad nauseum under the Trump administration, and yet, you know, up to 1 million Americans live there. How dare they? They're attacking their own people. They're obligated to defend Canada. Actually, the logic's kind of fun, isn't it?
In every country, living in every country throughout the world, far more than Israel. And that means we have to go and defend them. And I think, Rob, this is the real point, is that President Trump promised to avoid Middle East wars of exactly this kind.
Well, exactly this kind. This is a brilliant bit of rhetorical judo. First, as said, Rob is trying to use the presence of American expats, 200,000 in Israel, as a blank check for military escalation. He's essentially arguing, look, your people are over there. Of course we have to go in. Of course we have to do their bidding. 200,000 compared to your own country of what? 340 million? But Glenn is taking that logic and running it to its natural and frankly ridiculous conclusion. It's a reductio ad absurdum. Because if the United States is suddenly obliged to launch military strikes simply because some of its citizens choose to live abroad, well, the fighting would literally never stop. Just picture the scenario. There are American migrants everywhere, millions of them spread across the globe. It makes zero sense. The USA would have to fight for both sides, for both countries. I mean, what is this? They're supposed to deploy the military to every single nation on Earth the moment a local conflict breaks out, just because an American passport holder happens to be living in that postcode. Really? And then, this is where it gets really interesting, he's bringing it right back to Donald Trump. Glenn is dropping a rather inconvenient truth, right? He's reminding them that their very guy, this very guy, the one that they're supporting, he promised not to do this.
These endless wars that we've been in, I've gotten us out of so many. We don't want to get into wars. We're tired of fighting. I'm the only president in the last 84 years that didn't start a war. Under Trump, we will have no more wars. No more wars. No more wars.
So that was a fucking lie.
Trump's whole pitch was about keeping Western powers out of precisely these sorts of never-ending Middle Eastern entanglements. So, once again, it's a total disruption of the standard pro-war script.
And he said when he started off that it was going to be at most 6 weeks. We are nowhere near finished to this war. Again, the Strait of Hormuz is closed. The regime is very much in place. We're in exactly the kind of quagmire that President Trump promised we wouldn't be in.
There's just so much winning. The US is just winning under Trump. Oh, did you see the capitulation? The huge capitulation where he said, if you don't do this, if you don't come to our terms, we're going to end you. And then Iran just turned up and said, here are 10 things that actually are just terrible for you and amazing for us as the Islamic regime. And Trump went, yeah, amazing. We all win. Anyway, back to it.
Quagmire that President Trump promised we wouldn't be in.
The strait is closed.
I thought the focus was going to be on America.
Because the shippers are scared again of a potential. I don't think they have control.
Oh, my dude, why are they scared? Because of Trump. Because of what he's done.
The Strait of Hormuz. There's just a lot of fear that if you send a boat through there, an errant drone might actually hit one and you could have a huge mess, and I understand that.
Again, why do you think they fear? Why do you think that all of the insurance companies have pulled out? Is it because Trump, who said he wouldn't launch wars, launched a war? Yes, that's why.
As far as your claim that, I mean, that Iran is not a threat, why do you think, I mean, the president, as you just said, he made a name for himself 10 years ago by going after the kinds of people that start these wars. Why would he resist for 5 years of his presidency going into this kind of nonsense and then make a move like this if it wasn't critically important?
Because he's demented. It's demented Donald. He has lost his fucking mind. All the autocrats are playing him like a violin. They're just stroking his ego. They're telling him whatever he wants to hear. He's being played. And, along with him, so too are the entire United States.
If they didn't really believe that there was a nuclear program on the way, they were building thousands of ballistics to protect it, and that something terrible was going to happen, why do you think he would make such a mistake as you claim that he did?
Notice what Rob is doing here. Glenn is laying out the physical, material reality of the situation, the timeless dragging out, the massive regional disruption, the very sort of entanglement that Trump explicitly promised the United States would avoid.
Under Trump, we will have no more wars.
And Rob, he's just gliding right past all of that. He's completely ignoring the reality on the ground. Instead, what is he doing? He's going straight for a naked appeal to authority. And it's not even subtle. Just listen to the argument that he's throwing out here. He's asking, well, what reason would the administration have for making this move unless it was absolutely essential? Because, you know, no administration has ever been wrong before, have they? Especially this one. Oh no. And it's funny, isn't it? He's assuming the action is justified simply because the action is happening. That is the entire move. It's incredibly intelligent. It is precisely the same blind faith rhetoric that we keep seeing from the MAGA media ecosystem. Now, to be fair to him, this was the very same logic that was used to justify the invasion of Iraq over 20 years ago, which is exactly the parallel that Glenn is about to draw. Trust the intelligence, trust the leaders. They wouldn't do this without a good reason. Sure.
For the same reason that the Iraq War was launched based on total lies, and we got sucked in for over a decade. And the people that you're interviewing, including the people, if you're going to ask me a question, you have to let me speak for more than 4 words. Otherwise,
good call out from Glenn there. Sometimes you have to, not force yourself into a conversation, but remind the audience of what's happening. And that's largely what he's doing there.
There's no point in the conversation. The people that you're interviewing who are selling the Iran war to your audience are exactly the same people who sold the Iraq war to your audience based on exactly the same goals. And you can go to the website right now, the White House website, and you will see a huge page that says the U.S. completely and totally obliterated Iran's nuclear program. That was from June of 2025, the last time we went and bombed Iran with Israel. And now 8 months later, we're supposed to believe that we have to start this gigantic new war over a nuclear program that President Trump himself said was totally and completely obliterated and would take care of this problem into the future. This is exactly the kind of war that the United States has been destroying itself fighting, and exactly the kind Trump said he wouldn't get into.
Preach. Because he's right. That page is real. It's still up on the White House website right now. Iran's nuclear facilities have been obliterated, and suggestions otherwise are fake news. That is the actual title from June 2025. And the point that he's making with it is devastatingly sharp. Consider the sheer logic of that for a moment. He's pointing out this massive, glaring contradiction in the same interventionist narrative. If the official line just months ago, straight from the top, was that this foreign nuclear program had been wiped off the map, then how on earth is it suddenly being presented as an existential urgent crisis? It doesn't track, it doesn't make sense. It's entirely contradictory. You simply cannot have it both ways. You can't declare total historic victory, claiming the facilities were absolutely decimated, absolutely ruined, and then, fast forward less than a year, turn around to the public, your own audience who you've been selling this lovely narrative, and insist that a massive new military intervention is required because the threat is somehow bigger than ever. It doesn't work like that. That's the crux. He's taking the very rhetoric used to sell a past success, though, to be fair, it seems to have been a lie, and weaponized it against the push for a brand new conflict. He's essentially holding up a mirror to the policy and demanding that they make sense of it. So, go on, Rob. Make sense of it.
Would you agree that, Iran it was well documented during the JCPO that they were lying and cheating on that deal. German intelligence made that claim. They were trying to go to German companies and get their nuclear information and try and build up this behind the back of the JCPOA. Iran has long had nuclear ambitions. They've long wanted to, this is a country.
Do you know who else has? Israel? We don't even know if they've officially got nuclear weapons. But, we'll come to this later.
Nuclear ambitions. They've long wanted to, this is a country, and I know it's very trite to you and you've heard it a million times. They chant about destroying the United States. They chant about destroying Israel, which I know you don't like Israel, but the United States as well. So if they have a nuclear program that's extremely dangerous, if they're lying in a nuclear deal, what would you do about Iran? You can't go the Obama way. We were duped, we were fooled in that.
Right, I'm going to pause here because what follows is this lengthy back and forth about the specific inspection protocols of the nuclear agreement. I've covered it before. If you want to go see it, go check out the content. And look, to be fair, Rob might actually have a point about the amount of warning given before certain facility inspections. There is a debate to be had there, at least I think that there is. But it pulls us away from the much bigger question at stake. Essentially, they go back and forth, Glenn defending the deal, Rob poking holes in it, and neither one is really giving an inch. And then Rob puts it to Glenn directly, asking him whether he'd at least agree that Iran is a fundamentally deceptive country. Let's hear it.
There's so much deception with this country. You don't agree with that?
The country that is deceptive is Israel. They don't even admit they have a nuclear program. They don't allow inspections in. They didn't sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty to create a framework for keeping nuclear energy safe. Iran has signed that deal.
They also don't chant that they want to destroy the world.
Right. Hold on, let's actually sit with what Glenn just said, because it is, frankly, devastating, and Rob is desperately trying to skate past it with a bumper sticker response. Think about the framing Rob walked in with. Iran is the deceptive country. Iran is the one that can't be trusted. Iran is the bad actor in the region. That's the entire premise.
There's so much deception with this country. You don't agree with that?
And Glenn just inverted it completely with facts. Because which country in the Middle East actually has a nuclear weapons stockpile? Israel. Which country refuses to even publicly admit it has one? Israel. Which country never signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty? the very framework designed to keep this stuff under control? Can you guess? Israel. Which country allows absolutely zero international inspections of its facilities? Iran. No, it's Israel. It's Israel.
They don't even admit they have a nuclear program. They don't allow inspections in. They didn't sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty to create a framework for keeping nuclear energy safe.
And which country did sign the treaty and did agree to inspections and does have cameras crawling all over its nuclear sites? Iran. I mean, what more do you want? If the metric we're using here is deception around nuclear programs, then the entire narrative collapses in on itself. The country being held up as the untrustworthy rogue state is, on paper, doing more to comply with international nuclear law than the country being held up as the victim. But let's keep going.
Under the inspection scheme, it was the inspection scheme that the IAEA in Europe wanted. They have cameras in every single crevice of all of those facilities. The consensus of U.S. intelligence has been that Iran is not pursuing a nuclear weapon.
Now, this is one I want people to really hear, because it gets buried in the crosstalk, and it absolutely shouldn't. The consensus of US intelligence is that Iran is not pursuing a nuclear weapon. Not. So, not we're not sure, not the jury's out, not there are conflicting reports. No, the actual professional assessments from the United States' own intelligence apparatus is that the thing being used to justify this entire military escalation isn't happening. This has been the assessment for years. Tulsi Gabbard herself said it under oath to Congress. The intelligence community keeps saying it, and the administration keeps ignoring it. Anyway, Glenn carries on, and the next bit is where he really gets to the heart of the deterrence argument.
And, there are a lot of countries that have nuclear weapons, including North Korea, that we were told are so crazy. They don't use them because people aren't suicidal. And that's true for Iran as well. They've often shown restraint because they act in their rational self-interest.
You're saying an Islamist regime is not suicidal? They invented that whole ideology. I mean, that's where it came from. I'm willing to die to kill you because I think I'm getting 72 virgins at the top.
Okay, so Glenn's argument is really quite simple. Nuclear states, even the ones Western media loves to paint as unhinged lunatics, your North Koreas, your Pakistans, they don't actually use the weapons, do they? Why? Because regimes, by their very nature, want to continue being regimes. The people at the top like being at the top. They like their palaces. They like their power. They like being alive. And launching a nuclear weapon at a nuclear-armed adversary is, well, it's a fairly reliable way to stop being any of those things. That's deterrence. That's why the Cold War didn't end in a mushroom cloud. That's why North Korea, for all of its posturing, has never actually lobbed anything at Seoul or Tokyo. And Glenn is making the rather obvious point that Iran would behave exactly the same way. Because Iran, like every other nation state on Earth, is run by people who want to keep being in charge. So, how does Rob respond to this? To this fairly basic, uncontroversial pillar of international relations theory?
Willing to die to kill you because I think I'm getting 72 virgins at the top.
He brings up 72 virgins. And, I mean, we should stop and pause on this. Because this is, without exaggeration, one of the laziest rhetorical moves he could have pulled. And look, we have to call it what it is. It's a category error, a really, really basic one. The Ayatollahs are not trying to get vaporized for paradise. They're not. They are old men who live in nice compounds, old men with power, with, influence, with wealth, with families, with legacies that they want to protect. The entire Iranian regime has spent, 45 years building and maintaining an institutional grip on a country of 90 million people. And the suggestion that they just throw it all away for a theological jackpot is, frankly, insulting to everyone's intelligence. And here's the thing. We've actually had 4 decades of data on this. Iran has had countless opportunities to behave in genuinely suicidal ways. They haven't. Now, yes, they have funded proxies. Sure, they've engaged in regional power games. Absolutely. But every single time the stakes have reached the level of existential threat, of existential risk, they have pulled back. Because they, like every other regime on Earth, act in their rational self-interest. Which, funny enough, is exactly what Glenn gets to next.
You know, we prop up all kinds of Islamic regimes. We prop up the tyrannies in Saudi Arabia, in the United Arab Emirates, in Qatar, in Bahrain, in Jordan, in Egypt. Yeah. These are all, to varying degrees, very, very rigid Islamic regimes that live by Sharia law. We prop those up. 9/11 didn't come from Iran. It came from Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, it did. I mean, that's a fair point, but I got to ask you one more question before I let you go.
Yes, it did. Fair point. I've got to let you go. Great rebuttal. Damn. How do you recover from this?
Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, it did. I mean, that's a fair point, but I got to ask you one more question before I let you go. Israel or Iran, which do you think is more dangerous to the West?
Glenn rattles off the whole list. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Jordan, Egypt. Every single one is a rigid Islamic regime operating under varying degrees of Sharia law, and every one is propped up by American money, American weapons, and American diplomatic cover. It's an utter dismantling of the idea that Washington's posture in the region has anything to do with opposing Islamist regimes. And the best response that Rob can muster is, yeah, fair point. Well, he gave that one up a little bit quicker than one might have thought, didn't he? And notice, he doesn't sit with it. He doesn't let it breathe for even a second. He just pivots straight to the next question. Because if he actually grappled with what he's just conceded, the entire ideological scaffolding of the entire interview would come crashing down around him.
Right now, I think Israel, with its gigantic nuclear stockpile led by religious and political fanatics, is infinitely more dangerous to the United States than Iran is.
Now, is Israel genuinely more dangerous to the United States than Iran? That is a bold claim, a really bold claim. But, you know what? Let's just hear him out. Let's hear him make his case. Because right after he makes that case, he turns around and lands the single most important point of this entire conversation.
You think it's more fanatical in Israel than it is in Iran?
Look at how many countries they've attacked in the last 3 years. There's 7 or 8 different countries they've attacked. They've stolen land from Syria, Lebanon. They vaporized people in Gaza.
That they're constantly
Israel
attacked.
Is infinitely more dangerous.
They're constantly attacked for existing. I mean, you're a Jewish guy, right? You understand that.
No, that's not why. That's not why they're attacked. That's not why Israel is attacked. You know, there's a very complex history of them stealing land and being expansionist. But at the end of the day, I thought Donald Trump was going to focus on the American worker, the American community, revitalizing our Where is all that? We're only focused on the Middle East and wars in the Middle East. This is madness.
Now, that right there is the absolute knockout blow. So Rob is trying to drag the debate into this deeply emotional, highly personalized territory, even bringing up Glenn's own ethnic background to try and force a concession out of it.
I mean, you're a Jewish guy, right? You understand that.
He's leaning on that familiar, simplified talking point that regional hostility is purely about a nation's right to exist, entirely stripping away decades of complex territorial disputes and expansionist policies. But Glenn doesn't get bogged down in it, does he? He corrects the historical record, sure, but then he does something much more effective. He circles back to his thesis.
But at the end of the day, I thought Donald Trump was going to focus on the American worker.
And this is where he's landing a point that, frankly, shouldn't even be remotely controversial, even among Republicans. And as we've already seen, plenty of them have started to turn on the administration over precisely this. Because if you zoom out and look at the core message of the Trump campaign, what was it? What was the actual promise made to the voters? It was a promise to look inward, to rebuild the United States, to focus on domestic workers, local manufacturing, and the national economy.
We're tired of fighting. I'm the only president in the last 84 years that didn't start a war.
And on that front, let's be honest, the Trump administration hasn't exactly delivered either, have they? The explicit pitch was that the era of spending trillions of dollars and thousands of lives policing the Middle East was finally over. And yet, here we are. You've got a media ecosystem and figures within the administration itself who seem entirely preoccupied with the same Middle Eastern conflicts they swore that they would avoid.
You know, we'll stay around the country for 15 years, just bomb the hell out of everybody, make everybody miserable. Nobody knows why we're there, you know, the wars that never end.
They're banging the drum for escalation. They're laser focused on Iran instead of the actual Americans who are struggling to, pay their basic bills. And as Glenn is pointing out, it's madness. It is a complete contradiction of the very platform they ran on. And so, finally, we are very much watching the collapse of MAGA. About damn time.